So now we're going to move on to the second part of tonight's presentations. And what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at land titles. And I want to introduce someone named Senator Len Harris. I met Len Harris back in about 2019 at a Great Australia Party conference in Canberra. And he came to our hotel room and we began a conversation, and I don't think it stopped for like about 3 hours, and no one else could get a word in. We were just, the man's knowledge just blows me away. The things we discussed, the holes that he filled in for me, because I like to research. And because Len was in the Parliament and he was experiencing things firsthand, he filled in all those gaps for me. And it was an amazing pleasure to have that conversation with him on that day. And we've had many since, and we've appeared together at many functions. And I'll say that he's a great man. So I'm going to invite Senator Len Harris out, and he's going to discuss property titles for you.
Right, well, good evening. Thank you for having me at your place, and so many of you. It's not only is it a pleasurable thing to be here, it is also an honour. That's all right. I'm a North Queenslander. I used to think Victorians were different. So I'm not your usual speaker, turn your phones off, all right? My suggestion is the information we're going to share tonight, right, is quite extensive and covers primarily here in Victoria, but there's a lot of other information around it. So my suggestion is, if you've got enough battery on your phone, turn the minimum is the recording on and make a recording of it. Because, yes, there is a film being made of the entire night that will be made available to the group who's actually hosting us tonight. But there'll be so many things that you'll say, oh, what did he say about that? Okay, record it, please. The first slide is probably the hardest one for you to actually absorb and understand. Title deeds don't exist anymore. And when I say they don't exist, it is factual, which I will show you tonight, how your Victorian government has cancelled them, each and every one of you. There is absolutely nothing constitutional about what they have done, and when they did it, there was no Victorian legislation that empowered them to cancel your certificates of title. The main reason for that is when Queen Victoria pronounced Victoria itself, the only person that she gave power, authority and jurisdiction to in relation to Crown land was the Governor of Victoria. There is no statutory power or jurisdiction for the Victorian government to have anything or any function in your contract with the Crown. So when you purchased your parcel of land, that contract was a contract between yourself and the Crown of Great Britain. And the state of Victoria has nothing to do with it. They don't, because Queen Victoria at the time empowered your Lieutenant Governor to actually create folios, to employ people to make entries into those folios, to have the wasteland of the Crown surveyed and given a lot number. Then, through a bill from the House of Commons that empowered the Lieutenant Governor to actually provide parcels of land for sale. There is in Echuca two very, very important things in a little museum there. And if you're ever up there, make sure you go in and find them. The first one is a record of the referendum that was held in 1898 for the states to become part of the Commonwealth. Absolutely beautiful document. The second one is actually a sheet out of a newspaper in which the Lieutenant Governor announced that there would be an auction of 130 lots. So that is irrefutable evidence that the state government has nothing to do with your title. In fact, the rights of the disponeur, which is the Crown.
Connected.
Oh, really? Maybe we are talking to the Crown. Yeah, the rights of the disponeur, which is the Crown, are transferred to the disponee. That's the people who purchased those first titles, right? Travels without reservation, save for those that are set out in the deed of grant. And if you wanted to annoy Melissa Harris, no rally of mine, do a freedom of information and ask her to provide the powers that she oversaw in cancelling your titles. Again, Victoria is definitely different. Your registrar in Victoria is a public servant. So therefore she is accessible through FOIs. Use them. So the rights of the Crown pass all the way down to you. There is a very important High Court case, Commonwealth versus New South Wales. It's a 1927 High Court case. New South Wales had transferred parcels of land to the Commonwealth for the purpose of post offices, railway lines, ports, and a few other things. In some of those parcels of land, substantial minerals were found. And New South Wales tried to actually argue that yes, they had transferred the land to the Commonwealth, but they'd retained the minerals. That didn't go real well in the High Court. During that period, around 27, there were only 5 High Court judges, and it was a unanimous decision of the High Court that the rights of the Crown transfer to the purchaser, be it whether it's a private person or the Commonwealth. So, where does that actually leave us? It leaves us in the position that we need to exert our rights under the Constitution. As I said in the slide, the premiers of every state made a decision in 2013 to adopt a New South Wales Act for electronic lodgement. The then Premier there, O'Farrell, brought his New South Wales Act to COAG. So how many people are aware with the term COAG? Just to give me an idea. Oh, that's good, yes. So COAG is the Coalition of Australian Governments, COAG. It was established well back in history. There's no constitutional standing, and there is no state legislation to actually underpin COAG. It's what I call an it. It's just out there somewhere. Or the premiers off on a dirty weekend or playing golf. So, by 2013, the premiers, without actually consulting any of their parliaments, committed all of the states, the Northern Territory and the ACT, to adopting the New South Wales Act. So here in Victoria, all land transactions in the state are actually carried out on a New South Wales Act. And the Premier's agreed to do that knowing that your Victorian government cannot alter that act without the consent of every other state. So it makes an absolute mockery of the fact that a state government only has jurisdiction within the bounds of the state itself. So the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia requires each state and territory to operate within the confinements of the Constitution. I'll just grab mine. They're confined to operate within the terms of the Constitution. Your government, right, in August 2018, that is the annotated Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia. I'll put it down here later on, and you can come and have a look at the important section. Within our Constitution, the first 9 paragraphs of the Constitution is actually the empowering act that was passed through the House of Commons establishing the Commonwealth of Australia. Queen Victoria, in proclaiming the Commonwealth into existence, states very, very clearly that a bill from the colonies, debated in the House of Commons, amended, because originally the colonies were requesting the right of appeal to the Privy Council. At first, the House of Commons wasn't likely to agree to that. Somehow or other, that was resolved. So in the early part of our Commonwealth, we had the right of appeal to the Privy Council. Those 9 sections, being the actual English Act, it tells you at the top, right, that it's Acts 63 and 64 of Victoria. So the House of Commons is where the power lies in the British government. Just on a aside, one of the greatest frauds that have ever been perpetrated on the Australian people is Cook supposedly actually claiming the landmass of what we now know as Australia as terra nullius. Well, there are 2 reasons why he could not have uttered those words. The first one is the phrase terra nullius is Roman Franco law, not British law. So all the while that we have been having arguments that Australia wasn't void, because that's what it means, nobody occupied the area, right? That was a total farce, just to take us down or down in a rabbit hole. Worked like a dream. Cook, in actuality, recorded in his diaries as he planted the British flag in Botany Bay, he claimed the land mass in the name of the British government. Now, that seems a little strange, doesn't it? Well, we need a little bit of a history lesson. In the late 1100s, the then King Richard, wanted to actually go over to the Holy Land, which is Jerusalem, Judah, all of that area there, to return it into the hands of the Christians. The land barons in England in the late 1100s all had standing armies, but they were too busy trying to knock off a little bit of land off the next door neighbour. That's what the armies were for. So King Richard asked them to provide some of their soldiers to supplement his army to go over to the Holy Land. They agreed, and King Richard went over to the Holy Land, fought with the people who were there, was successful. So the Christians then controlled the Holy Land for 200 years. On the way back from that, he was captured and held for ransom for 10 years. That was eventually resolved. He was coming back through Normandy, raiding the odd castle or two to get some beer money because they were broke, and unfortunately was killed. That then brought King John on the scene. So King Richard's younger brother. It didn't take King John too long, as well as upsetting all the people, he upset the land barons by actually revoking King Richard's grants of Crown land. So has that got a familiar ring? What's happening through Australia? The very people that we elect to protect our rights and privileges are the same people doing exactly that, taking away our rights and privileges. The right to hold in your hand a legal document that proves you own your home. So, the land barons in 1203 created civil war against King John. That actually ran right through until 1215, when they actually captured John in the Tower of London. Now, back then, there was no Buckingham Palace, no Windsor Castle. There was a parliament, there, but the king or queen of the day lived in the Tower of London. So in 1215, John was forced to sign the Magna Carta. The interesting thing in the Magna Carta, and it is worth a read, I have on my website, thesilentmajority.au. Previously it was always thesilentmajority.org.au. So the IP holders decided to just turn the switch off. So we've had to drop the org out. So you can go on thesilentmajority.au and you can actually download an authorised modern English version of the Magna Carta. And it takes a couple of hours to read it. The important section is section 61. Section 61 gives 25 Lord Temporal, so that's the barons, right of veto over the sovereign of the day. And that still exists today. Just let that sink in, because that's going to be very, very important when myself, I hope there'll be somebody else, presents the petition to the House of Commons. It explains also, people have said to me while I was in the Senate and ever since, why didn't Queen Elizabeth, God rest her soul, why didn't she do anything? Because in 1215, the absolute sovereignty was removed from the sovereign. And the only power that the sovereign has today is to either reserve a bill or give assent to a bill. So that is why our petition is actually directed to the King's ministers assembled in the House of Commons, requesting them to bring on, the wording is documentation, but it means a bill, to effect what we're asking in the prayer in the petition. So, back to Victoria. August 2018, without consulting you, the Victorian government sold the Titles Office. Now there's a really interesting maxim in law, and it is, a river cannot rise higher than its source. So in this case, the actual power that was granted to the Parliament to create the Titles Office is the start of the river. As the river has collected streams and everything all the way down, it becomes greater, but there's no way that that river can rise higher than its source. So where the Victorian government gets the power and jurisdiction to sell a statutory body, there is no power. So who purchased the Victorian Titles Office? Well, there it is. If anyone wants photos on that, just come out and get photos. If I move on, I can always go back. But remember, you're getting a copy of this anyhow, as a group. So Aware Super, it's a New South Wales superannuation fund with $150 billion of Australians' superannuation funds that they actually administer. And they have over 1 million members. Aware Super also purchased the New South Wales Titles Office. In 2012, First State merged with Health Super, a not-for-profit superannuation fund for workers in the health and community service section. That made the conglomerate the third largest superannuation in Australia. In 2016, First State acquired State Plus for $1.1 billion to boost its offerings. The asset has since underperformed, losing $400 million, and ASIC is even investigating the diligence of that corporation. Now we get to the nitty-gritty. If you want a copy of this, definitely come up and get a good one. Electronic and paper certificates of title. On the weekend of 22nd of October 2016, Land Victoria, the actual titles office, had been sold off. So this is a corporation that is doing this, not a statutory body. That's a good one to ask Melissa. On the 22nd of October 2016, Land Victoria completed the bulk conversion of paper certificates of title to electronic certificates of title. Who did they do that for? They did it for the 4 major banks: ANZ, CBA, NAB and Westpac, and their other brands. So the Bendigo Bank is in there as well, as Rod has so successfully stood them up and give them a bloodied nose. The exception is titles that had mortgages by RAMs. There must have been some technical way. Rod might want to answer that later on. Read the words, right? Completed the bulk conversion of paper certificates of title. So they did this on the 22nd of October in 2016, and yet they are still this same entity, Land Victoria, is still falsely providing people a paper title that they've already cancelled. Just let that sink in for a while. The only other reason that I can foresee for the Victorian government doing that for the banks is so as to give the banks some protection for on-selling mortgages. Now, I do have a letter that Rod and I are keeping under wraps at the moment from Westpac, clearly stating that a group of the Australian banks, not necessarily all of them, but some of them, are doing what has happened here. They've parcelled up the mortgages, converted them through 2 trusts, and then on-sold the mortgages in the financial world. So your mortgage, in technical terms, is what is called an equitable mortgage. That means there are equal rights for the person who is selling the property, equal rights for the person buying the property, and equal rights for the entity that's providing the funds to do so. That's what an equitable mortgage is. When any one of those 3 entities voids or sells the debt, that breaches the equitable mortgage. In Queensland, they've actually gone further and legislated in Queensland no mortgages are registered. And the only thing that one can conclude from that is so that it makes it easier for the banks to on-sell the mortgages. So somebody asks you, who purchased the Victorian Titles Office, right? Now we all know. The government also used legislation to underpin what they had done. So under Section 32 of the Subdivisions Act 1988, the registrar may call in and cancel any certificates of titles for common property folios of the register. The registrar will declare any paper CTSs for common property folios to be void and of no effect under Section 278 AA of the Transfer of Land Act 1958. The declaration will be published in the Victorian Government's Gazette and take effect from the 15th of January 2017. You now know that Victoria cancelled all existing titles. Now, when they say paper, what is a parchment title? A parchment title is paper that has been sealed back and front so that it extends the life of the paper. So when they speak of paper titles there, they are also talking about all parchment titles as well. There's the infamous Barry O'Farrell, introduced the New South Wales Act, Real Property Amendment Electronic Conveyancing Act 2015, number 23. So he introduced that to the premiers at a COAG meeting. He brought it in 2012. By 2013, the premiers, without even consulting their cabinets, have actually decided to adopt the New South Wales Act. The Parliament of Victoria enacts, right? The main purpose of this act is to adopt in Victoria a national law relating to electronic conveyancing, and then it goes on. So what have they just done? This is the first time, there is no date on that, I apologise for that, but it was 2016 when the Victorian government, through that act, which we questioned the validity of that act, because the act was made by the Australian government, not a government that had been established under the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Australia. So again, even though the state government has passed that piece of legislation, it is void, of no effect. There is a Section 5 in the Constitution that sets out very, very clearly that an act beyond power is void. We don't have to actually obey it. It provides no protection as well. COAG met in 2012 and without authority created these unregulated entities that now control all land transactions in the whole of Australia. The first thing they created was the Australian Registrar's National Electronic Conveyancing Council, which is a bit of a mouthful, so it's easier to call them ARNEC. Wish they would nick off, actually. So, once COAG created ARNEC, then ARNEC, this it that's out there somewhere in the ether, with no authority, no jurisdiction, right, then created the Electronic Lodgement Network. So this is quite interesting because how many people have heard of Link, L-I-N-K Corporation? Right? Yes? Freeways, tolls, tunnels, right? Link, well, the majority of us all have heard of BlackRock, okay? So BlackRock sits up there. BlackRock has substantial shares in Link, and Link has substantial shares in BlackRock. So when you think of Link and the next time you've got to pay a toll, that's who you're paying. So Link put up $200 million. The Commonwealth Bank put up $200 million. And Stanley and Morgan, through one of their one of their arms, put up $200 million as well. So that's 0.6 of $1 billion that have been put up to actually create a network. So this is an electronic network, think fibre optic cables, etc., throughout the whole of Australia. The interesting thing is that Link, up until a few weeks ago, held the majority of shares in one of the operators that operates on that network called PEXA. The electronic conveyancing law was created by ARNEC, and all of the states have adopted that in their parliaments as the process of conducting transfer of property. The next one they created was the Electronic Lodgement Network Operators, and that's where PEXA comes in. PEXA itself holds 80% of the details of land ownership in Australia. I got a very snooty email from one of the directors of PEXA telling me in no uncertain manner that PEXA did not hold title deeds. And that is so. The government has cancelled all the paper and parchment titles. PEXA says we don't hold titles. And that is the basis of there being no titles. So nobody sitting in here tonight listening to this has any legal document that they can hold in their hand to prove they own their property, because they don't exist. The only thing that exists is a small strip of binary code that has within its content a lot number and your name. That is it. So currently in Victoria, if you wish to sell your property, you have to come up with 100 points to to prove you are who you are. The conveyancer who has paid a fee to be able to access either PEXA or simply Australia logs on. Oh yes, all right, you've got lot such and such and such and such. That is all the person selling has to do. The purchaser then, obviously, needs to have finance and everything. All of that is encompassed in this $600 million network. So the transaction is completed and the person says, well, where's my title? And then they get the bad news, there are no titles. And don't be assured, oh, but I've got my contract. I have had confirmed by considerable law, barristers and everything, a contract of sale is not proof of ownership. Neither is your rates notice or your telephone bill or anything. So there's your new registrar in Victoria, Melissa Harris. She's the registrar for Victoria Titles. She's also the registrar for Victorian Water and the acting chief executive of LUV. So there's ARNEC. That's a little bit about them. We all know that there is no constitutional power for them to exist and no state power. The model participation rules, they're the rules that PEXA and Simply Australia operate under. Same thing, it's just an it. It's not derived from any parliament. It is not an act of parliament. It is only a law. So then we get to the electronic lodgement network operators, and that's PEXA and Simply Australia. The national law, which I've spoken about. So there's PEXA Group Limited. They are on the stock exchange. Link, the parent company, held 48% of the shares in PEXA, thus controlling the company. And here comes the first of many problems. PEXA's 1.6 billion sale raises concerns amongst bankers. The 1.6 billion sale of electronic property settlement company PEXA to a consortium, including the Commonwealth Bank of Australia, has raised concerns in the banking industry. So remember I said to you that PEXA put up 200 million in seed funding, so did the Commonwealth Bank, and so did Morgan and Stanley. So Link, for their original investment of 200 million, having only sold 42% of it, so they're still retaining 8%, which is substantial, right? They picked up 1.6 billion. Not a bad return on your money, is it? So here we have Simply Australia on all of the research that I've done is still domicile in Australia. The other problem, and we'll just go back up to PEXA, the main entity, this is what my research so far has shown, is a Canadian corporation. The trouble there becomes that they are an international entity and are operating under international law. And under international law, the entity that stores the data owns the data. Now I'm not saying they have any rights on your properties whatsoever, but I can see problems in the future in relating to whoever has actually purchased that 42% of PEXA under international law. They only own the data itself. So along with the CommBank and Morgan and Stanley, how are they going to justify to their shareholders that they have spent that money on their behalf. The only thing that I can see, because PEXA and Simply received the $296 for registering the transfer, where are they going to get the return for their shareholders? Cast your mind back to the, say, 70s and 80s when we purchased our first computers. We would take it out of the box. I'm not sure about Apple. My IT guy refers to it as a bit of fruit. But if it's a Microsoft computer, you buy a program. Take the program and the computer home, set it up, and away you go. Not anymore. All Microsoft computers now come with Microsoft 365 on it, and you pay $15 a month to use it. Microsoft has disclosed to the Australian tax people that there is 1.5 billion 365 Microsoft computers in Australia. So multiply 1.5 billion by $15, and that's not a bad return for a month. And that is called monetarising the asset. So just park that in the grey matter at the back of your brain and think, you know, when it does happen, because I believe it will, we will be forced then to pay for them to store the data. Not talking about Microsoft now, I'm talking about the people who hold the data. They're simply the only corporation that I can find in Victoria that is involved in the electronic lodgement is the Secure Electronic Register Victoria Proprietary Limited. And their duty is to guarantee the security of the register. There's the infamous Mr. Turnbull in 2020, thinking he was being smart, morphed COAG into the National Cabinet with the intention that he was then going to embargo all of the minutes of the National Cabinet for 30 years. Well, that was challenged in the High Court and lasted about 25 nanoseconds, and he was told, you're not a statutory body, you cannot embargo the decisions of a corporation. During part of that schmozzle that occurred, remember he claimed to be the minister of 19 different departments. What he didn't explain then was that these committees were all developed under COAG. What we now have in plain sight here, that these 19 entities were being managed and funded totally outside of the parliamentary process. So you can read them through: Agriculture, Attorney Generals, Community Services, Council of Federal Financial Relations, Data and Digital, Disability Reform, Education, Emergency Management, Energy and Climate Change. Don't they need a bomb under them? Environment, Health, Housing and Homelessness, Infrastructure and Transport, Joint Council on Closing the Gap. Anyone seen the Gap lately? We've got one in Queensland. It's called Cunningham's Gap, and it's a wild ride down it, I can tell you. Skills and Workforce, Trade and Investment, Veteran Affairs, Water and Murray-Darling Basin, Women and Women's Safety. What have they missed? Men. Yes. There's nothing for us. And there's nothing else for me to do to name the traitors who have done this to you here in Victoria. So there's no power within the Constitution to dispense or transfer land of the Crown through proprietary limited corporations. So that's what's doing it. All land transactions with the Commonwealth shall be transacted directly between the Crown and the purchaser in fee simple, as expressed in the respective proclamations of each state by Queen Victoria when establishing them. So that is absolute proof that the whole process that is transacting land sales here in Australia. So there was only one more slide that shows the people who were part of COAG during that period. Okay, so questions. Do we have somebody with a roving mic, please? Maybe the roving mics have gone to sleep as well.
Len, we found the mic. Here's the other. I've got a question.
Yes.
Down here in the front.
Right.
With the national law and COAG. So this is something that we are addressing at the moment in the courts with the doctors, and it's pertaining to the national law, which is a Queensland Act.
Yeah.
And we're also going against fighting APRA as well. So what we're saying is that the states cannot create laws and name them national law, because that's fraud.
Correct.
And it's the same with APRA. They are only a state body, so each of the health practitioners, regulatory authorities should have the capital of their state in front of them. So this is a matter we are addressing in the courts at the moment. Now, the states cannot get together and adopt a law unless they go through the due process under the Constitution pursuant to section 5137.
They cannot, full stop.
No, that's exactly right.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
So
they can't do it.
It is void. So,
yes, so
yeah.
it's unconstitutional. COAG is absolutely unconstitutional. So it's
Well,
a matter that
we
could
all know
go
that.
into the
So
court.
what's your question?
So the question is, if we go into the court and say COAG is an unconstitutional organisation, because the states cannot just get together and adopt a law, they must go through section 5137 of the Constitution and
Well,
refer
they
their power
can't.
to the Commonwealth.
No, the states can't go through section 51.
37.
No, 51
Oh, sorry,
is
sorry.
the power
Yeah, 51, 37.
because they are not under the Constitution. They are a corporation. So therefore, any legislation that has been passed since 86 is void.
Well, this is the other thing, that's another matter to take in the Australia Act, especially challenging section
Well,
11
can we have
of the
something
Australia
in
Act.
relation to land? Your
Well,
question.
Can we go into the courts and invalidate COAG?
No,
Why?
because it doesn't exist.
Okay.
No, the courts are the wrong place. The place to resolve that is in the House of Commons in England to declare all of the Governor-General and all the governors of all of the states, their positions will be declared void and they will be replaced in compliance with the Constitution. Under the Westminster system, one government cannot bind a subsequent government. They only have the power and authority to govern for the 3 years that is written on the writ. And when we're talking about writs, as many of you as you can before the federal election bombard the Federal Electoral Commission that even though their election will be ultra vires, they are still required to put a copy of the writ in every polling booth throughout the whole of Australia. Give them heaps. Yeah. Sorry, so, yeah, unfortunately. Yeah. Any more questions, please? Yes?
My question sort of is my understanding that you said that a Canadian company, what's international,
Yes.
that's international, that has to do with the mortgages, banks, everything, so they're owning part of all of this. Effectively, we've paid off our mortgages or paid towards mortgages whatever, or paid off the houses, have the paperwork, everything. But that's all cancelled anyway, even if you were holding your title.
Correct.
That's all gone. Even if you paid it off 15 years ago, that's gone.
Can I just jump in there quickly, right? If you have paid your mortgage off and the bank has still their title on their name on your title, right? Actually, there is a technical term, help me, Rod, to have it discharged. Because while the bank's name stays on your title that is registered in the correct registry, they actually use the value of your property on their asset side of their ledger, and they can actually create funding based on their ability. They only have to have 10%. So whatever their assets are, including yours, if their name hasn't been removed off your title. Yeah, indefeasible title, as Rod just added. So back to the lady, sorry, but that was important.
Yeah, there was sort of like, well, you know, I was wondering, I just paid off and just got my title just the other day, just discharged.
Yes.
So, you know, I've been asking for a paper title, and, you know, I had an argument with who that I had to ring up for the title, and they told me I could only have digital. And so I said, well, look, you've taken all the money off me. I've been paying all this off, the house for so long. I've been paying it off since the land, because your title's about your land. It's not about your house. The house is just that you've improved the land.
Yeah, well, that
right?
becomes...
That's an improvement. That, you know, your title's about the land. And the question that was, well, effectively, have I paid all this off just to have been a slave, an international slave, because if I'm paying it to Canada and that's international, but by international law, then nobody's allowed to be a slave. We're supposed to, if somebody's working as a sex slave or a working slave in a kitchen, we're supposed to dob them in. Well, I've even had a harder thing done to me and everybody else in Australia if this is effectively done. We're having that done, then we have to pay our GST at the supermarket plus on any tax or anything else, and so on and so on.
Is there a question in relation to the titles,
well,
please?
Am I understanding that right, that I'm a slave, an international, and worse than a slave?
No, you're not. You are no one's slave. Okay? Well, this is why. Can I ask everybody who is here tonight, and there may be somebody will need to get a printer going out front, can I ask each one of you, not only having signed the petition as you came in the door, if you didn't, make sure you sign the petition on the way out. Could you also take a copy of the signature page and work on getting, I think there's something like 24 signatures. If every person here, there's over 200, so somebody smarter than me can do the maths. If each one of you take one page and get 25 signatures, right, we're well on the way. We believe we're sitting somewhere just north of 10,000, so that leaves us with another 90,000 to get. Okay? Please, if you are willing, take a page. We will work out a way. I'm sure the majority of you are members of My Place or common law groups or something. We will work out a way for you then to return those pages to us. Thank you very much.
Yes, there's one more question here. Yes, I do have some printouts, so if anybody wants those pages, let me know. Now, there's one question from this man here.
G'day, Len. I paid my house off and had no encumbrances on my property, and the banks lost my title. Right?
They didn't lose them.
Yeah, I know they didn't lose them. And so I went to the bank and said, where is it? And they sent me this bullshit blue form saying that I paid it off and I own no encumbrances and all this.
Yes.
And I said, this ain't my original title. Where is it? How is there a way of getting it?
Unfortunately, no. But what you can do, under the Torrens title process, this came into existence in about 1826. Torrens was a member of the South Australian government. The boys in, see, you ladies wouldn't have done this. The boys in the titles office were running the gambit of a certificate for the purchaser, a certificate for us on the same property, and they would either sell it, say, in South Australia or Queensland, and you imagine there's no interaction between the colonies of any sort. They got away for it for a while. Torrens came up the idea that there are 3 identical original titles, and when you purchase your property, the title is property and it's yours and you're entitled to them. First one went to the first person who purchased the property. Second one was held by the titles office, so it was convenient if the property was sold that both of those could be updated. The third one, I'm not allowed to put that finger up, the third one is held by the Victorian Archives. And the reason for that was that the titles office has no access to the one that is in the archives. You can, and I strongly suggest that you do, contact the Victorian Titles Office, it'll be somewhere here in town, and ask for a research period. They'll need you to give them some ID, your lot number, your address, etc. It will take them from 4 to 6 weeks to actually pull all of the information relating right back to the first certificate of title when it was created. It is important, as Rod said earlier on tonight, if you don't know where you've come from, how the hell do you know where you're going? So I generally say to people, tell them, well, I'm doing family history, or I'm just a nutcase and interested in tracing the history of my title right back to the original grant. Because the rights of the first grant are yours in perpetuity. Okay, so I can't tell you the addresses, but I'm sure everyone can use Uncle Goggle to find it. Yeah, and just be polite. They will be. I do know of 2 occasions, one of which was in WA. There are real human people in the archives, and they're probably as much, am I allowed to say pissed? Yeah, I did. They're probably as much pissed off as much as we are for having our titles cancelled. So, in these 2 occasions, they actually brought the physical folder out. Now, they are, and I'm not exaggerating, about so wide, about that high, and about that thick through. And they allowed those 2 people to colour photograph them front and back. So there always is the history in the archives right up until 2016. if you purchase property since 2016, until we get this petition in the House of Commons and a bill from them to reverse the harm that our corporate governments have made to us, right? There is no way that we can do a lot here in Australia. So I think there's somebody much more, well, pretty anyhow, than me. So, no, you've had your turn. Come on.
Look, Len was, what I wanted to say, just to give you a bit of clarity to it, in Western Australia, what Len was saying was correct. And what we did, I don't know if you saw a live stream, I live streamed at Landgate. Now, when the banks turn around and say that we've burnt the title or you can't get it back, that is larceny. It is permanently depriving and it is your property. And that's how we got the Register of Titles to open up the vault, because I said, well, if you're not going to give me back my property, because the certificate of title is property, that is larceny and permanently depriving, and then that becomes an issue for the Treasury of the state. And of course, the Treasury can't have a sticky bomb on it. So, yes, you can, but Len's right. They'll say you can't. You need pressure, like we did in Western Australia, because the more it becomes public, the more people go down and rattle the cage. They end up being forced to open it up, because you can't conceal a lie, and it's a fraud, and it's actually a criminal offence. So that's how we got our certificate of title. Don't let them bluff you about, oh, well, we can only give you a record. You want the certificate of title, the very one that created, like Len has said, the folio, volume number and fee simple.
Just
absolutely, it's yours. There's 3 copies. Yes, there's one that stays with the bank, one that you should have, but they don't ever give it to you. And but what has happened is they've traded that instrument. That's why, you know, you would have all heard about the securitisation. But we won't get in that tonight. But that's, put the pressure on them. You demand it. That's it.
There is one more option for every one of us. If you go to lendata.com.au or lendata.gov.au, whatever, one of the Lendata websites, you can search, there's so many searches, you can go to historical search, and then you can actually, for $22, get in 5 minutes print of your all original documents. So there will be original document with the all the, you know, the first title which was created, and you will have a list of all the owners of this property. Okay, everyone can do this search, and everyone can do it at home. You can print this, and then of course, if you feel that it's necessary, I believe you can go with this document to notary, ask him to stamp it, that is actually a real document, or real copy, and then at least you have something. Okay, you will have the history of all the owners. This is only, you can only get this if the property wasn't subdivided. Okay, so if somebody built, for example, 3 units on it or 2 units on it, you won't be able to get that original document. You can get this document, but then you have to search for further, you know, but that's a different story. I'm sorry, but I'm not really, I'll give you the mic. Len, there are a few more questions, I'm sorry. Okay, just one more question, okay? This lady here, just a second. One more, last question.
Thank you.
I tips me hat to you all.
Thank you, Len. Just one question, simple question.
Yes.
Is this unique to Australia? Has this happened in any other country?
No.
No. Wow.
In Canada, Canada brought the electronic lodgement in 2000. Canada is even a little bit better than we are. Their documents that gives them proof of their ownership of their property is a letters patent document. So there's absolutely no argument in Canada that their contract that they entered into is directly with the Crown. New Zealand adopted electronic lodgement in 2010, and New Zealand still issue certificates of title. Queensland, between 20, get it right, Len, between 2013, when the Queensland fully moved into electronic lodgement, the government actually continued to actually provide certificates of title up to 2019 when they cancelled them. So there is no reason, and no rhyme either, for all of the states to actually A, cancel our titles, or to cease issuing them. So no, there is no other country in the world that that actually is going around cancelling the titles of the people. Okay, well look, thank you so much. I know it's a bit of a dump. I mean, I know there's a lot of information in what we've gone through tonight, and I will provide a copy of the PowerPoint to any of your groups that I can help. Rod and I do need your help. We even this is the most amazing group of people that have ever turned up. I've been doing this since 2019, right? You are fabulous. We need your help.